All right, today we're going to be subtracting integers. We've been adding integers. You might remember that if they have the same sign, I simply add them and keep the sign of the number that they were. So 2 plus 6 is 8. Answer is positive because the two integers I added was positive. Negative 2 plus negative 6, my answer is going to be negative 8. Same sign, they're both negative, so I add them and I keep that sign. Remember, these parentheses are simply for separating that addition sign from that negative sign or subtraction sign, and that is why it's there. It doesn't mean to multiply, it doesn't mean that I'm doing it first, it just is simply there for separation. You also remember that if I had 2 plus negative 6 or negative 2 plus 6, don't really need those parentheses there in that case, but you could use them. Different sign, so I'm going to subtract, and I will keep the sign of the number with the larger absolute value. So since negative 6 is further from 0, it has the larger absolute value, so my answer will be 4. In this case, different signs again, so I subtract. 6 minus 2 is 4. 6 is still the number with the larger absolute value, and it is positive, so my answer is positive 4. Now, if you remember, when we first started doing adding integers, we used number lines. So we're going to start that way with subtraction as well. So it says, what would it look like to draw each of the following on a number line? And let's start with that first one. And what I want you to do is I want you to pause this video and I want you to draw these. And then I want you to come back and compare them to what we have. So for the first one, hopefully you started at 4 because I always start where the first number tells me to go. And then this is telling me to add a negative 5. And what we learned is that when we're doing a negative 5 and we're adding it, it's telling us it wants us to go in this direction 5 hops because 4 plus a negative 5 is the same thing as 4 minus 5 when I'm looking at a number line. So my answer is negative 1. When I do 4 plus 5, I start at the positive 4, and addition tells me to go to the right, as well as that positive 5 telling me to go to the right, and I end up at 9. When I have 4 minus 5, this is telling me I'm going to go to the 4, and then it wants me to go to the left, or the opposite direction of the way I just came there, and it equals negative 1. So you might have just heard me say that this tells me to go in the opposite direction. I went to positive 4 and then it told me to go back. When I come here and I have 4 minus a negative number, I'm still going to go to the 4. Now this is telling me to go back that way. But then this second negative sign is actually saying, wait a minute, this wanted me to go back. I want the opposite of that. So this is telling me I want the opposite of negative 5. Well, the opposite of negative 5 would be positive 5. So we see that if I'm subtracting a number, it's the same as adding the opposite. If I'm adding a number, it's the same as subtracting the opposite. And so what you'll find is this is the same as that these are the same, that they're interchangeable. So to subtract integers, subtraction is the same as adding the opposite, because those negative signs or subtraction signs are actually telling me to do the opposite. So change the subtraction sign. Since it's the same as adding the opposite, we're going to change the subtraction to addition. So if I have 3 minus 4, I'm going to change that subtraction to addition. That's step 1. Then it says change the second number to its opposite. So it was a positive 4. I'm going to make it a negative 4. And then in step 3, you're going to follow the rules for integer addition. So I'm like, one's positive, one's negative. Those are opposite signs or different signs. So I'm going to subtract them, and I'm going to keep the sign of the number with the larger absolute value. So let's practice this, and you are more than welcome to get out those number lines that you have on your table in your basket, and you should also be writing all of this into your math notebook as it's told you to do. And this first one right here, I'm going to rewrite each problem as an equivalent addition problem. So I'm changing all of these subtraction problems to addition problems. I never, ever, ever change this first number. Leave the first number alone. It does not change. But I am going to take this subtraction sign, so negative 5 minus 8. So on a number line, I would start at negative 5, and then I would keep going to the left 8. Pardon me. I'm going to change the subtraction to addition. And then I want the opposite of the 8, and the opposite of positive 8 is negative 8. For this next one, once again, I'm not touching the 6. Leave it alone. But I am going to change the subtraction to addition. And then I want the opposite of the 5, which is a positive 5. So this has become 6 plus 5, the same way that this became negative 5 plus negative 8. What I want you to do right here is I want you to pause this video, and I want you to try the others, and then turn it back on and check it. So as you can see, I've turned all of these subtraction problems into addition problems. And a little thing that you can keep in your head is that you are going to keep this first number. Leave it alone. You are going to change subtraction into addition. And then I want the opposite of that second number. So keep the first number, change subtraction to addition, and I want the opposite of that second number. So negative 2 minus 8 became negative 2 plus negative 8. This is easier to apply those addition rules to, so that's why we want to do that. So now we're going to not only rewrite these problems as an equivalent addition problem, but we are actually then going to apply our addition rules. So 3 minus a negative 8, remember I'm keeping that first number same. I'm going to change my subtraction to addition. So keep, change subtraction to addition, and then I want the opposite of negative 8, which is positive 8. So I now have 3 plus 8, which we know is 11. For this next one, I'm going to keep that first number. I'm going to change subtraction to addition, and I want the opposite of whatever is going on there, negative 16, so positive 16, so negative 4 plus 16. Opposite sign, so I subtract, and it's going to be positive because 16 is larger and it is positive. Number 9, I'm going to keep that first number, change subtraction to addition, and I want the opposite of that, so I get 12 plus 9, because the opposite of negative 9 is positive 9, and I get 21 as my answer. I want you to again pause the video, and I want you to try those last 6 problems, write them down in your math notebook and try them, and then turn it back on and check them. Alright, so I want you to go through and I want you to check all those answers. Pause this video if you need to, and check your answers, see if you agree. If you don't understand where something came from or you disagree with it, I want you to circle that number in your math notebook so that we can go over it tomorrow when I'm back. So a question that you might see on a test, like the AIR test or on our digits test, or that you might come across in your digits homework, they might say, we want something that is equivalent to this right here. So one trick that I like to teach kids is I'm going to take that, and you know the rules here. the same sign, so I'm going to add them, and they're both negative, so I know it's -5. I'm just going to go down here and I'm going to answer all these, and any of them that equal -5, they're going to be the ones that I select. So if I have -2 plus 3, you know the addition rules. You're like, I subtract those, I get 1, it's a positive one, so that's not 1. Then I've got -2 minus 3. Remember, I keep that first number. I'm going to change subtraction to addition, so I don't have to make up any new rules. I'm changing that. And then I want the opposite of the second number. So -2 plus -3 is indeed -5, and I would want to circle that. This next one is 3 minus 2. Now you just know that 3 minus 2 is 1. You could change this into adding the opposite and use those rules, but you also just know that 3 minus 2 is 1. Not what I'm looking for. When I have two subtraction signs, if when I'm subtracting a negative, I am going to turn that into adding a positive. And tomorrow when we meet, I'm going to explain why that works. But that gives me a +5. Then I'm going to keep that one. I'm going to change addition to subtraction. And the opposite. So that's -5. -3, I'm going to keep that. I'm going to turn subtraction rather into addition. I did that up here too. My apologies. Subtraction to addition. Thank goodness for a cool erasable pen. Subtraction to addition. And I want the opposite of that. Well, -3 plus 2 is going to give me -1. So my answers there are B and E. Alrighty, same type of problem. Which ones are equivalent? So when I look at 5 minus 20, 5 minus a -21, I remember I'm going to keep this first one. I'm going to turn subtraction to addition, and then I want the opposite. So I'm going to add the opposite. So 5 plus 21 is 26. So I'm looking for anything that equals 26. I want you to pause the video right here, and I want you to see if you can figure out which ones that would be. Alright, so check out what's happened there on my page. See if you agree. Make sure you got the same answers. If you didn't, I want you to put a star next to the ones that you got incorrect so that we can go back and take a look at those tomorrow as well and make sure that you truly understand what's going on there. Our next one involves a little bit of absolute value. So these are absolute value as opposed to these just being parentheses. And if this starts to confuse you, that's okay. Once again, we will talk about this. It says select all the following which are equivalent expressions. Well, 3 plus 3 is +6. -3 plus -3, well, that is -6. But you remember those were inside the absolute value bars. So I want to know how far is that from 0? Well, they are 6 spaces away from 0. So that would be an equivalent situation. 8 minus 7 is 1, and the absolute value of 1 is 1. 7 minus 8 is -1, and the absolute value of that is also +1 because they are both 1 space away from 0, so those are also equivalent. 6 minus a -5 ends up being 6 plus 5, which is 11. 6 minus 5 is 1, and the absolute value of that is 1, so these are not equivalent. Why don't you pause this and see if you can get the last two. These last two, 2 plus -5 is the same as 2 minus 5, so we know that those are going to be the same thing. This one might have given you a little pause. You've got to make sure you turn that a subtraction into addition and get the opposite there. So you end up with -4 plus 1, which is the absolute value of -3, which is 3. Absolute value of 3 is also 3. This last page, remember, make sure you're copying these all down in your math notebook. I want you to try this one. We've got -30. We're going to keep it. We're going to change subtraction to addition and get the opposite there. So -30 plus 12 equals -18. Pause this and see if you can figure out which ones are correct. Alrighty, go ahead and you can check these out. You can pause the video, make sure that you've written all this down, and let me know if you have any questions when we get back together.